This next story is absolutely heartbreaking and incredibly disturbing. Raw Story is reporting that a Texas couple fled to Mexico after a failed attempt to raise a starved toddler from the dead. They say, quote, officers received an anonymous tip March 26th that the 2-year-old boy had died nearly a week earlier but was not reported. So we have some video here from NBC News. Warning, it's a little bit off-putting here, but let's take a look and then we'll come back and discuss.
Images of a rising ceremony.
¿Quién es ese niño?
Es Benjamín. Benjamín es
A witness who identified the child as Benjamin said she knew his mom since she was pregnant with him. The woman on the video with the child in her arms is Araceli Mesa, identified by witnesses as the pastor of a church called Iglesia Congregacional Pueblo de Dios that operates from her home in Box Springs. According to the witnesses, the pastor said that the child was possessed by demons. She also said he went without food for 25 days before he died.
En nombre de Jesús Todopoderoso, y lo unjo con aceite.
In the name of Jesus, she used oils to try to bring him back to life. She speaks in tongues during the ceremony, which lasted for hours. She invokes Jesus to give breath to the child.
That's incredibly hard to watch. Raw Story explains, quote, police went to a Box Springs home, which also operated as a church, where they were told a rising ceremony had been performed 4 days earlier in an attempt to resurrect the child. The child's body was taken to Mexico the next day by his parents and other members of the congregation, and the video of the ceremony shows that the woman there was the church secretary, and she was praying and speaking in tongues over the toddler's body, which she was putting oils on him as well, and all the other congregants gathered around. This is basically a sect, or a certain kind of Pentecostal church here. And the main takeaway when you watch something like this is something that really the only people I hear talking about this issue are new atheists, and they deserve credit for it. This is only something you hear people like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Bill Maher, Daniel Dennett. It's only things that these guys talk about, and they're 100% right. And sometimes I think this point doesn't land with most people because it's hard for them to conceptualize that people actually believe some of the things that they do believe. But here you see it. This is the power of belief. And you see basically a family that was willing to starve their child for 25 days as they did. The kid died of starvation, and then they just thought, like, no, I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. This is my religion. We're going to have a resurrection ceremony. Everybody at the church knows about it. It's a Pentecostal church. It's something that is a tactic that has been done in the past. We've heard stories from other people, from other churches that, oh, it worked, and this is what you do, and they believed it to the point where they starved their kid to death. And then they tried to resurrect the kid, and I'm not kidding, they were shocked when the kid didn't rise. I'm not kidding. The secretary who you saw there, she ends up crying later on when the kid doesn't resurrect. She cries. She's like, I can't believe the kid didn't resurrect. Well, no shit the kid didn't resurrect. You guys were all brainwashed. You bought into the bullshit. And this is the problem with beliefs. The power of religion can force you to believe shit that is absolutely absurd in any other context. See, this is what they mean when the new atheists talk about take fundamentalists at their word. When you hear people say, we want Israel to wipe out all the Palestinians because then Israel has their rightful land, and then God can come back, and we're rooting for apocalypse, and we're rooting for the rapture to happen, and we need Israel to wipe out the Palestinians in order to do that. When you hear people like John Hagee and other ultra-fundamentalist Christians say that in America, they believe it! They believe it! They believe it! They would cheer it on if there were death camps for Palestinians. They would love it because they actually believe what they're saying they believe. By the same token, basically a religion, even though it was essentially a secular religion, but Nazism and fascism, you don't think that the people who were shoving Jews in gas chambers really didn't believe the Jews were inferior? You think what? That they were doing it because just everybody else was doing it and there was no belief out on any level? No, you have to convince yourself of it. You're brainwashed enough where you believe it. You believe Hitler's grand vision of, well, there's this spectrum of humanity. On one end is the Germanic people, the Aryan race, which, by the way, didn't even really exist, which is even crazier. It shows you this really is a religious ideology, based on German mysticism of this previous time that was non-existent, where Aryan people, Germanic people ruled the world, blonde hair, blue eyes, and they controlled everything. And then on the other end of the spectrum of humanity, there were the evil Jews. And near the Jews on the spectrum were gypsies and black people and anybody who wasn't Aryan. Oh, you're somewhere on that other end of the spectrum. The Aryans made exceptions. Oh, Italians are kind of with us, right? And Greeks, you're kind of towards the Aryan end of the spectrum, but you're not Aryan. But we're not going to kill all of you because you're more towards us on the spectrum. They had these beliefs, this spectrum belief, and they thought, no, that's really how it is. So we're doing a service to humanity when we wipe out all the Jews. They really believed this. Cults, same thing. The people at the Jonestown Massacre, when they drink the Kool-Aid, that's where the phrase drink the Kool-Aid comes from, is the guys killed themselves for their leader, Jim Jones, the real Jim Jones. It was a cult. And they believed, oh, he's looking out for us, he's doing the right thing for us, let's drink this. The Heaven's Gate people, this is something Sam Harris spoke about on his podcast recently, where these guys were convinced that there was like an alien ship coming behind Haley Bop's comet, and they were going to kill themselves, and when they did, they would get to the ship, and they really believed it. And you go back and you look at their recordings, when they're saying goodbye to their family members, and they're basically like, they had genuine sympathy for people who weren't part of their cult, who weren't about to kill themselves, because they really believed that there was the ship there and they were getting on it. This is the power of belief and the power of religious thinking. And what happens is, you never know where it's going to end up once you let go of reason and rationality and logic. Once you take away your care of evidence, once you stop basing your beliefs on what is empirically verifiable, where's the evidence? Once you stop focusing on that, you never know where it's going to end up. It might end up with you strapping on a jihadist vest and killing yourself to get to the 72 virgins, or it might end up with you in the Heaven's Gate cult, or it might end up with you being a Nazi, or it might end up in a situation like this where you starve your kid for 25 days, your kid dies, and then you're shocked when the kid doesn't resurrect. This is why people need to believe in science and reason and rationality and logic. And again, the new atheists, to their credit, are the only people talking about this. Oftentimes you hear from progressives who I agree with on pretty much everything else, but sometimes they fall into this trap of thinking, well, everybody is kind of like me, right? That's their thought. Their thought is, well, you know, sure, there's all these different religions in the world and all these different belief systems, but most of them, they're moderate X, you fill in the blank with whatever religion or cult it is. And they just want, like Ben Affleck said to Bill Maher and Sam Harris, what do you mean there's people just want to get a sandwich and live a decent life and watch some TV and relax? Yes, most people in all the different religions do want to do that. But there are some that do not. There are some that do not. There are some evangelical Christians that would cheer on wiping out the Palestinians. There are some Muslims that would cheer on the death of every infidel in the world. There are some people who really believe the most absurd versions, and people need to recognize that and acknowledge that. And we need to fight back against, not with violence, because that oftentimes creates more problems than it solves, but you need to fight back in the realm of ideas against all the kinds of irrationality and stupid beliefs that are out there, because it ends like this.